I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. And today's video is going to be my Twisted and Taboo readathon vlog, TBR, all of that. So the Twisted and Taboo readathon is a readathon being hosted by Jess from Peace Love Books, Tori from Novel Life, McKay from Oh Hey It's McKay, Cheyenne from That Tall Book Girl, and Sam from Sam Reads a Little. And the readathon is lasting from September 16th through September 19th. So just a quick weekend readathon. So I started off with 5 reads on my TBR for the readathon, 2 of which are part of series, and so I'll probably end up jumping into those series afterwards. I have Daddy's Sweet Girl from Stasia Black. This is actually a reread for me. I don't remember reading this one at all, but apparently when I looked on Goodreads, I had read it back in like early February, March of 2020. My friend Monica actually reached out to me on Instagram and was like, hey, do you want to reread this one together for the readathon? So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So this one is on KU. It's a novella, and I know it is a stepfather, stepbrother romance with the heroine. Then next I have the group pick, which is Forbidden Obsession by Regina Wade. I have never read from this author before. This one is also a novella, and I know it is a stalker romance, so I will check that one out, also on Kindle Unlimited. Then I have Dark Notes from Pam Godwin. I've been meaning to get to this book for forever, so this readathon is the perfect time for me to get to it. This one is a student teacher romance. I know the heroine plays the piano and I believe goes to like a music school, and then the hero ends up being her like mentor or teacher there. I've heard great things about this one. I love Pam Godwin's other books, like Sea of Ruin is one of my all-time favorites. I'm excited to finally get to this book. I also want to get to The Risk, which is book 1 in the Mind F series by St. Abbey. This is a serial killer romance. I believe the heroine is the serial killer, and then the hero, I believe, works for law enforcement or the FBI and is trying to track her down. And of course, the heroine has reasons for it being a serial killer. I know this series is very addictive and that each book is pretty short, so you're going to want to binge. I believe there's 4 of them in the series. This series is on Kindle Unlimited. This one has been on my TBR for over a year. I remember when I believe Jess from Peace Love Books read it. The first person I heard or read about it was her like over a year ago, and she was obsessed and loved it, and so it's been on my TBR ever since, and so now is finally a chance to get to it. And then I have Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark. This is the first book in her Brutal Birthrights series. I have been majorly edging this entire series for a long time. I know this whole series and Sophie Lark in general have a huge hype around her, and so I've just been afraid that it wouldn't live up to the hype for me or that I wouldn't love it, even though a lot of my friends do, so I've just been worried and kind of putting it off. But if I end up enjoying it, I will definitely be continuing on in the series. So those are the 5 books I have on my TBR for the readathon. The hosts are all doing reading sprints every day on a different channel on YouTube, which is super exciting. They had one kicking off Thursday night before the readathon, so I actually started reading then and have actually got through a couple books already. The first book I read was Dark Notes by Pam Godwin. This is a special edition cover I have from Hello Lovely Box. It is signed by Pam, and I just love how like super floppy this one is. So this is the copy that I read. So this one, like I mentioned, it is age gap. It has the student-teacher situation. There is BDSM in here used as healing. The beginning of the story was definitely harder for me to get into. The heroine, Ivory, she has had a rough life, like to say the least. Definitely content warning in here for rape and sexual assault. So she has lived in poverty and has had to take care of herself, keep a roof over her head, and like her mother and brother, they're kind of like absent in her life and kind of a mess as well. But before her father had passed away when she was like 12 or 13, he had actually paid in full for her to go to this prestigious music school because Ivory is a talented pianist. And so to pay for her school supplies, keep the roof over her head, give herself food, like she will do whatever it takes to take care of herself. So she is now a senior in school, and she has a new school teacher slash mentor, and that is the hero. The hero is Emmerich, and he transferred to this school after he was the dean of a previous school, and there was like a scandal situation where he had to leave. So now he is a teacher at her new school. This book I ended up giving 4 stars to. I did really enjoy the last half more than the beginning. The beginning, as far as with Emmerich, the hero, was harder for me to get into. He is definitely intrigued and interested in Ivory right from the start. And like at first he thinks she's a teacher instead of a student. And then even from there, like he's ready to punish her and like pleasure her and just, you know, protect her and take care of her. But for me, some of his early POV scenes and kind of the way he is towards her, like me knowing as the reader her past, like it just came off uncomfortable, like almost slightly icky for me, and it just made me kind of like not be a fan of his character in the beginning, because I definitely wanted there to be more of like a build up or ease into their relationship. Like I kind of wanted them to maybe bond first before they jump into some of his thoughts and like all the things he wants to do to her. Thankfully though, there is more of a slow build up for the physical side of their relationship. As far as when they finally have sex, that is definitely slowed down towards the later end of the book. I thought their relationship and power dynamic was super fascinating. I really liked how the hero ends up giving up power to Ivory Ivory as well. There's definitely some sad scenes in here with him having to teach her of like how consent works and non-consent, like all of the things that have happened to her in her past. She has never realized all the wrongs that have been done to her in her life. She's kind of just assumed that no one has taken advantage of her, that she was like into it or whatever, which if that was her thinking that, or if that was just her mind kind of trying to protect herself, to kind of take some of that control or power back over the situations that she was put in. That was hard to see for Ivory. I'm so glad her and the hero get their HEA in this. It was definitely satisfying to see. The hero in the last half definitely won me over. I loved how protective and how he cares for Ivory and will go out of his way to hurt the people who have hurt her. Yeah, I love their relationship. And like I said, the power dynamic was super interesting to me. Yeah, 4 stars. Then I read Daddy's Sweet Girl from Stasia Black. This is on Kindle Unlimited and it is a novella. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. This one is just a short, wild ride. Heroine is 19 when the story starts and her mom is getting married to her new stepfather. So at the wedding, she meets her new stepfather and her stepbrother, which we find out the marriage between her mom and her new stepfather, like it was all just a marriage of convenience situation. Like her mom isn't even around, doesn't even live with them, but the heroine starts to live with the stepfather and the stepbrother, and it becomes a relationship dynamic between the 3 of them. Definitely some taboo things going on in there. One of the characters in here was definitely my least favorite of the trio, which you learn more about as the kind of story blows up and unfolds towards the end of the book. I liked how the ending is kind of resolved and how we learn some things going forward. The heroine does get some time away from both the stepfather and stepbrother and has that time to like grow and be out there on her own, which I like to see before she got her HEA. But this one is definitely filled with tons of daddy little girl kink, so if that is not for you, definitely do not read this. Yeah, 3 stars for this one. Then I read Forbidden Obsession, which is the group read, and this one is by Regina Wade. It is on Kindle Unlimited and it is a novella. So it was my first time reading from this author. This one has age gap, and then also the hero is a stalker. So this one I honestly expected it to be steamier from what the blurb and the tagline and the cover says, which was actually more sweet, which I was just expecting more steam, so that was kind of a letdown. In this one, the heroine is a yoga instructor and then the hero is a private investigator. During one of his cases, that's actually how he ended up stumbling across the heroine while, you know, following somebody else. So he's been watching her for the past month. Like he'll sit outside the yoga studio, he takes pictures of her, like he has a dark room in his house filled with pictures of her, all of that. He's looked into her background, like he learns that they're both put in the system growing up, and so he just feels like this bond to her and wants to protect her. But he also knows that he's older than her and he doesn't feel like he's worthy enough for her. So one night he actually ends up rescuing her from a situation with another man, and then they kind of form a friendship over that, and she's like, you know, let me pay you back, like I can teach you yoga, like, you know, I can cook you dinner, like what can I do for you? So he ends up walking her home, and then he's like, well, I'll take a kiss for the payment instead. So they kiss, and the next day she's like teaching him yoga, and it all moves like super fast because it is a novella. Honestly, I'm surprised at this one how very upfront the hero is with being a stalker and watching the heroine. He even tries to put her off of him, like, I'm too old for you, I have been watching you, like doesn't that creep you out? And she's like, no dude, like it's totally fine, like you're protecting me, I don't care, like you're cool. Like he even takes her back to his house, he shows her the dark room with all the photos of her in it, and she's just like totally chill and cool with it all. So yeah, this one was more sweet than anything, and I just liked how open and honest they were the whole time. I gave it 3 stars. So then I jumped into the Brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark, and I read Brutal Prince, the first book, and holy crap, I love this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. I can't believe I put off this series for so long. Like as soon as I started it, I was like, oh god, what if I don't like it? But then also, what if I do love it and I want to continue on? So there was that like whole dynamic going on in my mind. This one is great. It is enemies to lovers, like true enemies to lovers. Like the heroine almost kills the hero a couple times in the book. They are from rival mafia families. They both live in Chicago. He is part of the Irish family, and then she is part of the Italian family. Their families have been like rivals for generations. So one night the heroine and her brothers end up crashing the party of the hero's sister, and so they end up at his house. She goes inside the house, and when her and the hero end up both in the library at the same time, for her to escape, she ends up starting a fire and stealing one of their family like heirlooms in there. So it leads to him and his family, you know, chasing down her family. And then some fights lead out where both of their fathers end up getting involved, and they're like, you know what, we need to sit down and meet. Like we're sick of all this bickering and drama. Like we've both lost family members to one another over the years. Like can we just end this feud once and for all and like move forward? So they decide to have an arranged marriage between the hero Callum and the heroine Ada. So I love this. They banter and bicker and mess with one another right from the start. Like he like messes around with her pre-wedding like spa day. She messes around with the wedding tux that he has to wear at the wedding. She finds out some things and almost kills him during the wedding ceremony, which was wild. This book had me laughing so hard at some of their funny moments, especially the wedding scene. I love the banter between them and the bickering and that very just like hate to love of vibes. I love the heroine. She is badass and amazing and my style of heroine. Great chemistry, great mafia action. Loved it so much. Definitely going to continue on in the series of 5 stars for Brutal Prince. So then I jumped into Stolen Air because of course I'm going to continue on in the Sophie Lark series. Thankfully this does meet one of my other prompts, which was Captor Captive. This one I ended up giving 4 stars. I didn't love it as much as I loved book 1, but it's definitely a solid romance. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling with of course that mafia family twist. The hero in this, he wants revenge against the heroine's family because they were involved and killed his father. So one night he sees the heroine, who she is actually a ballerina. She is the baby of her family and she has always been kind of sheltered and protected from the mafia life. Like she knows nothing about the family business and she's just very naive to it all. So one night she ends up at his club that he owns. He spots her and recognizes her and immediately is like, that's perfect. I'm going to use her to seek revenge out on her family. So he ends up kidnapping her and she becomes his captive. This one is very strong on the Beauty and the Beast, the whole fairy tale retelling, which I loved. The only issues I had with this one was actually the heroine. I'm not really a fan of the more fragile, sweet, naive type of heroine. I really love the more badass heroine like we got in the first book. But yeah, that's definitely a personal preference for me and just the reason why I gave it 4 stars. So I will check in later when I have more books to chat about for the readathon. All right, so I'm here to wrap up this video and talk about the last few books that I ended up reading for the readathon. There's currently like some chainsaw going on in my neighbor's yard. They're cutting down a tree. They've been at it for the last 3 days. So that is that noise if you hear that in the background. Okay, so I ended up reading Savage Lover by Sophie Lark. This is the 3rd book in her Brutal Birthright series. And this one has been my least favorite in the series so far. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. This one had less of the mafia action, less of the family interactions as well. So in this one, Camille is the heroine and she actually works at her dad's like car shop. Like she's a mechanic. He owns like a garage shop. It's just her dad, and her brother. And her brother's like in high school. So she's trying to keep him out of trouble when the story starts. Her brother's 17 and she just wants him to do well in high school and then do well with any of his like future plans after that. So she finds out at the beginning of the story her brother like went to this party, so she goes there, tries to get her brother out of trouble. She also finds out her brother was selling drugs, so she ends up like covering for him because the cops show up. She covers for her brother and then she goes and meets the drug dealer and that her brother was selling for. It ends up getting involved in both of those situations, like with the cop who was kind of like, well, hey, we can use you to go and find out more from the drug dealers and the people he's working with. And then she ends up working with the drug dealers as well because they're like, well, your brother still owes us, like he needs to sell off like this, and this. So she ends up kind of working at both sides. Along the way, she ends up connecting with Nero, and he's the hero of the story. He is Ada's brother, who is the heroine of the first book. So this one just felt very different than the rest of the world. It felt very like, you know, just tons of parties, tons of car races and fast cars. There was like a bank heist and robbery situation, just like a lot of other things going on. I did like that Camille and Nero kind of connected. They're both very lonely, hurt souls, just like looking for somebody to love them. So I love that they did find each other and, you know, opened up and shared secrets with one another that they hadn't shared with anybody else in their past before. So I did like that aspect of their relationship. But otherwise, this one was just okay for me. I gave it 3 stars. I heard from quite a few other friends after the fact that this is like a least fave of theirs as well, but it won't keep me from continuing on in the series. So next I read Bloody Heart, and this is the 4th book in the Brutal Birthright series. I was just on a Sophie Lark binge. This one I gave 5 stars to, and it's definitely like my top 2 of the series. I think the first book, Brutal Prince, and then this book, Bloody Heart, are my 2 favorite in the series so far. This one just delivered on everything for me. It had the angst of the whole second chance romance. It had that 9 years apart, like that longing and that angst. It brought mafia action. There was all sorts of other like interesting things happening behind the scenes in the story. I loved seeing the family time as well. This one we actually get to first see when Simone and Dante first meet. They meet when Simone is 18 and Dante is like 2021 when they first meet, and they're like instantly both in love with one another and just that kind of young, sweet love. We get to see that over the course of months that they're together. Simone is from a family, like I believe her father's like involved in politics or something, and he has very specific ideas of what Simone's future is going to look like. And Simone's kind of, you know, she wants to do like fashion school and she wants to go a different route. So she's kind of dealing with that. And then, you know, her parents meet Dante as well. They're like not interested in him for their daughter. And so they know like kind of the realities of their future like aren't looking that great. And then one night when Simone has something to talk to Dante about, he ends up being late because he's dealing with like his family stuff and gets involved in like some mafia things. So he shows up late to meet her and he's like all bloody and all of that. And so in the time that Simone had been waiting for him, she had kind of started to think about like all the realities of what their future together would look like because she knows his family's involved with the mafia. And so she just kind of like freaked herself out, got a little scared, and is like, you know, this isn't the future that I want. So she ends up breaking up with him, breaks his heart, and leaves, and like we don't see them together again for 9 years. Then when they do get back together and they're back in each other's lives, I loved all of those times together, that tension of like they're not wanting to talk to one another. Loved that, them like tiptoeing around one another and just kind of like trying to ignore the other one when they're around. I loved how Ada, which is Dante's sister, gets involved at like a party they're all at. She kind of pushes Dante like, hey, don't you want to go dance with Simone? Like, go dance with her, she's right here. So they end up dancing, and you know, Ada just being Ada. And holy moly, holy wow, the way that Dante makes Simone apologize for breaking his heart was chef's kiss, super hot. Loved that entire scene. So yeah, definitely one of my favorites in the series, and 5 stars for this one. So this readathon has just turned into like a Sophie Lark binge marathon for me instead. Like I'm just putting all of these books under the mafia on the bingo board because, you know, they don't meet any of my other prompts, but I'm like having the best time ever. So like it is what it is. Okay, so Broken Vow, which is the 5th book in the Brutal Birthright series. I gave this one also 5 stars. This one is a bodyguard romance with Raylan, the hero, and Riona, the heroine. She is very like that icy, grumpy. She's a lawyer for the family. Like she's just very much grumpy heroine. And then Raylan is like the total opposite. So he's charming and sunshiny. He was a former soldier and now he is like a cowboy rancher as well. At the beginning of the story, Riona's life is actually in danger. She ends up almost getting drowned at a pool when she's swimming in. And so her family kind of steps in and, you know, freaks out, which, you know, rightfully so. They want to protect her. So they're like, hey, you need someone to watch you. Like we want to put this bodyguard on you. And so her brother Dante puts Raylan on the case because he was involved in the last book in the story. And Riona's reaction was hilarious. She's like, oh my God, like I do not have time for this country boy shtick right now, like that he does. Like I'm not in the mood for this dude. And so it was so funny just seeing them kind of banter together and him like slowly break down the ice around her. Their chemistry and connection was just like so apparent right from the start. I loved seeing it. I definitely connected with Riona a lot. I definitely understand that kind of icy, grumpy exterior that you can put up, you know, barriers. I totally get that. I loved when he takes her to his ranch in Tennessee. She gets to meet his family. She ends up bonding with his mom while they're there. He teaches her how to ride a horse, a little bit of riding a cowboy too. Raylan also takes her to the barn for some fun times. There are ropes. There's a riding crop. Like these people just have a fun time. I just loved seeing these two together and their chemistry. I also loved some of the conversations they have because Rihanna was like, I don't want to be tamed. Like she watches him one day taming horses and she's like, don't try to tame me. And so I loved that whole conversation that they have as well. And yeah, just another great one in the series, and I gave it 5 stars. Okay, so next, since it was the last day of the readathon and I did really want to get to the next series, I decided to put the last book of the Sophie Lark series on hold, and I'm definitely going to get to it though once this readathon is over. But so I got to The Risk, which is the first book in the Mind F series by S.T. Abbey. Like I mentioned, this series has been on my TBR for over a year and I've been wanting to get to it, and so I'm so glad I did for this readathon. Basically in this one, the heroine Lana is a serial killer and she has a list and she's taking out revenge on some men who have wronged her in the past. And then she meets and ends up dating a FBI profiler and investigator who is actually investigating her case and trying to profile the killer that is her, and like he doesn't realize it. So they start dating one another. So I loved both of their energy right from the start. They end up having like an accidental meeting at a coffee shop and he like purchases her lunch or something like that, buys her coffee and like her food, and so she approaches him like, I'm not interested, like, you know, get away from me. And so they both start profiling one another, which was super fun to see. And there's just this really hot electric energy like right below the surface when they're meeting, which like I could just feel the tension and the angst, and I was like, yes, I'm here for these two to get together. Each of the books in this series, there's 5 of them, and they are like 100-ish pages here or there. Like some are a little less, some are a little more, but they're not very long, so they're very like serialized and you're going to want to continue on in the series. But I just love it. This one ends on a cliffhanger. I don't want to say too much about it, but you definitely see some of Lana's backstory and you learn more about Logan, who's the FBI profiler, who's her boyfriend. I love the dynamic and relationship that they have. It gave me vibes of like Dexter, and then also Promising Young Woman, which is a movie with kind of the same like badass woman taking down these men who've like wronged them in the past for reasons. So I loved it. It had me on the edge of my seat the whole time, like, because, you know, you're just waiting for that tension and angst, like, when is he going to find out that she's the one he's looking for? How is it all going to end? Like, where's the story going? So I'll definitely be continuing on in this series. But yeah, I gave this one 4 stars, and that was the last book I read for the readathon. So I ended up reading 9 books for the readathon. I had a great time. I definitely found 2 new series that I want to that I've already been binging, the Brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark. I'm going to continue on with that. I have 1 more book in that series, and then I'm going to jump into the Mind F series as well after this readathon. So it's just a fun time to jump into some dark and twisted and taboo books that I was finally able to get to, so I loved that. And I had a great time. I just had a couple 3 stars, and the rest were 4 and 5 stars, so I loved to see that. It's definitely a successful readathon for me. I had a great time. Let me know in the comments if you participated in the readathon and maybe what some of the books you read were, or if you had a favorite, or if you read any of the books that I did. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat about it. I've already chatted with quite a few friends about the Brutal Birthright series and continuing on with Sophie Lark. So if you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.